Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, where we traverse through the pastimes of Krishna and associate with the greatest personalities that have ever walked the earth and the incarnations of Krishna that have walked the earth and the whole universe every day. And we associate with them. They're present in sound. And welcome to the live studios, right here in the Haven. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Mahima Stotram, from Sri Krishna Lila Stava, verses 412 through 416, by Srila Sanatana Goswami, the senior disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in terms of age and in responsibility, and person who was instructed for the longest period of time, continuously, by Lord Chaitanya. And his glorification of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho Kalidvandoditaditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nishtadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Sadhu Tadayin Atini Chochata Kada Hanamun Chagadachin Mam Premna Rit Kanta Yokspura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Hare Krishna, we reach the 54th chapter of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna has just put Rukmiṇī onto his chariot right in the middle of everyone's view and is slowly taking her away without fear. Chapter 54. Krishna defeats all the princes and takes Rukmiṇī home to Dvārakā. Jarasandha and all the other princes were very angry at Krishna for having kidnapped Rukmiṇī. Struck by Rukmiṇī's beauty, they had all fallen from the backs of their horses and elephants, but now they began to stand up and properly arm themselves. Picking up their bows and arrows, they began to chase Krishna on their chariots, horses, and elephants. To check their progress, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty turned and faced them. Thus terrible fighting began between the two belligerent groups. The princes opposing Krishna, who were led by Jarasandha and were all expert in fighting, shot their arrows at the Yadu soldiers, just as a cloud splashes the face of a mountain with torrents of rain. Gathered on the face of a mountain, a cloud does not move very much, and therefore the force of rain is much more severe on a mountain than anywhere else. The opposing princes were determined to defeat Krishna and recapture Rukmiṇī from his custody, and they fought with him as severely as possible. Rukmiṇī, seated by the side of Krishna, saw arrows raining from the opposing party onto the faces of the Yadu soldiers. In a fearful attitude, she looked upon Krishna's face, expressing her gratefulness that he had taken such a risk for her sake only. Her eyes moving, she appeared sorry, and Krishna, who could immediately understand her mind, encouraged her with these words: "My dear Rukmiṇī, don't worry. Rest assured that the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty will kill all the opposing soldiers without delay." As Krishna was speaking with Rukmiṇī, the commanders of the Yadu dynasty's soldiers, headed by Lord Balarama, who was also known as Sankarsana, as well as by Gada, not tolerating the defiant attitude of the opposing soldiers, began to strike their horses, elephants, and chariots with arrows. As the fighting progressed, the princes and soldiers of the enemy began to fall from their horses, elephants, and chariots. Within a short time, millions of severed heads, decorated with helmets and earrings, had fallen on the battlefield. The soldiers' hands were severed along with their bows and arrows and clubs. Arms were piled upon arms, thighs upon thighs, and horses upon horses. Similarly, other animals such as camels, elephants, and asses, as well as infantry soldiers, all fell with severed heads. When the enemy, headed by Jarasandha, found that they were gradually being defeated by the soldiers of Krishna, they thought it unwise to risk losing their armies in the battle for the sake of Shishupal. Shishupal himself should have fought to rescue Rukmiṇī from the hands of Krishna. Little change of tune here. But when the soldiers saw that Shishupal was not competent to fight with Krishna, they decided not to lose their armies unnecessarily. Therefore they ceased fighting and dispersed. Some of the princes, as a matter of etiquette, appeared before Shishupal. They saw that Shishupal was discouraged, like one who has lost his wife. His face appeared dried up. He had lost all his energy, and all the luster of his body had disappeared. They addressed Shishupal thus: "Our dear Shishupal, don't be discouraged in this way. You belong to the royal order and are the chief amongst the fighters. There is no question of distress or happiness for a person like you, because neither of these conditions is everlasting. Take courage. Don't be disappointed by this temporary reversal. After all, we are not the final actors. As puppets dance in the hands of a magician, we are all dancing by the will of the Supreme, and according to his plan alone we suffer distress or enjoy happiness. We should therefore be equipoised in all circumstances." Although in the beginning the princes had been full of hope for success in their heroic action, after their defeat, they could only try to encourage Shishupal with flattering words. Thus, Shishupal, instead of marrying Rukmiṇī, had to be satisfied with the flattering words of his friends, and he returned home in disappointment. The kings who had come to assist him, also disappointed, then returned to their respective kingdoms. The whole catastrophe of the defeat was due to the envious nature of Rukmiṇī's elder brother, Rukmiṇī. Having seen his sister forcibly taken away by Krishna after he had planned to marry her to Shishupal, Rukmiṇī was frustrated. So after Shishupal, his friend and intended brother-in-law, returned home, Rukmiṇī, very much agitated, was determined to teach Krishna a lesson personally. He called for his own soldiers, a military phalanx consisting of several 100,000 elephants, horses, chariots, and infantry, and equipped with this military strength, he began to follow Krishna to Dvārakā. To show his prestige, Rukmiṇī promised all the returning kings, you could not help Shishupal marry my sister, Rukmiṇī, but I cannot allow Rukmiṇī to be taken away by Krishna. I shall teach him a lesson. Now I am going to follow him. He presented himself as a big commander and vowed before all the princes, unless I kill Krishna in the fight and bring back my sister from his clutches, I shall not return to my capital city, Kundina. I make this vow before you all, and you will see that I shall fulfill it. After thus vibrating all these boasting words, Rukmiṇī immediately got on his chariot and told his chariot driver to pursue Krishna. He said, I want to fight with him immediately. This cowherd boy has become proud of his tricky way of fighting with Kshatriyas. But today I shall teach him a good lesson. Because he had the impudence to kidnap my sister, I, with my sharp arrows, shall teach him very good lessons indeed. Thus this unintelligent man, Rukmiṇī, ignorant of the extent of the strength and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, voiced his impudent threats. In great stupidity, he soon stood before Krishna, telling him repeatedly, stop for a minute and fight with me. After saying this, he drew his bow and directly shot 3 forceful arrows against Krishna's body. Then he condemned Krishna as the most abominable descendant of the Yadu dynasty and asked him to stand before him for a minute so that he could teach him a good lesson. Oh. You are carrying away my sister, just as a crow stealing clarified butter meant for use in a sacrifice. You are proud of your military strength, but you cannot fight according to regulative principles. You have stolen my sister. Now I shall relieve you of your false prestige. You can keep my sister in your possession only until I beat you to the ground for good with my arrows. Lord Krishna, after hearing all these crazy words from Rukmiṇī, immediately shot an arrow and severed the string of Rukmiṇī's bow, making him unable to use another arrow. Rukmiṇī immediately took another bow and shot another 5 arrows at Krishna. Being attacked for the second time, Krishna again severed Rukmiṇī's bowstring. Rukmiṇī took a third bow, and Krishna again cut its string. This time, to teach Rukmiṇī a lesson, Krishna shot 6 arrows at him, and then shot another 8 arrows, killing 4 horses, and with 4 arrows, killing the chariot driver with another arrow, and chopping off the upper portion of Rukmiṇī's chariot, including the flag, with the remaining 3 arrows. Rukmiṇī, having run out of arrows, took assistance from swords, shields, tridents, lances, and similar weapons used for fighting hand to hand. But Krishna immediately broke them all in the same way. Being repeatedly baffled in his attempts, Rukmiṇī took his sword and ran swiftly toward Krishna, just as a fly proceeds toward a fire. But as soon as Rukmiṇī reached Krishna, Krishna cut his weapon to pieces. This time, This time, Krishna took out his sharp sword and was about to kill him immediately. But Rukmi's sister, Rukmiṇī, understanding that this time Krishna would not excuse her brother, fell down at Krishna's lotus feet. I'm so sorry, my computer went to another place. Yes. Rukmiṇī took his sword and ran swiftly toward Krishna, just as a fly proceeds towards a fire. But as soon as Rukmiṇī reached Krishna, Krishna cut his weapon to pieces. This time, Krishna took out his sharp sword and was about to kill him immediately. But Rukmi's sister, Rukmiṇī, understanding that this time Krishna would not excuse her brother, fell down at Krishna's lotus feet, and in a very grievous tone, trembling with great fear, began to plead with her husband. Rukmiṇī first addressed Krishna as Yogeshwar. Yogeshwar means one who is possessed of inconceivable opulence and energy. Krishna possesses inconceivable opulence and energy, whereas Rukmiṇī's brother had only limited material potency. Krishna is immeasurable, whereas her brother was measured in every step of his life. Therefore, Rukmiṇī was not comparable even to an insignificant insect before the unlimited power of Krishna. She also addressed Krishna as the God of the gods. There are many powerful demigods, such as Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, Chandra, and Varuna. But Krishna is the Lord of all these gods, whereas Rukmiṇī's brother was not only an ordinary human being, but in fact the lowest of all, because he had no understanding of Krishna. In other words, a human being who has no conception of the actual position of Krishna is the lowest in human society. Then Rukmiṇī addressed Krishna as Mahabhuja, which means one with unlimited strength. She also addressed Krishna as Jagatpati, the master of the whole cosmic manifestation. In comparison, her brother was only an ordinary prince. In this way, Rukmiṇī compared the position of Rukmiṇī with that of Krishna, and very feelingly pleaded with her husband not to kill her brother, just at the auspicious time of her being united with Krishna, but to excuse him. In other words, she displayed her real position as a woman. She was happy to get Krishna as her husband at the moment when her marriage to go to another was to be performed, but she did not want it to be at the loss of her elder brother, who after all loved his young sister and wanted to hand her over to one who, according to his own calculations, was a better man. While Rukmiṇī was praying to Krishna for the life of her brother, her whole body trembled, and because of her anxiety, her face appeared to dry up and her throat became choked, and due to her trembling, the ornaments on her body loosened and fell scattered on the ground. In this manner, when Rukmiṇī was very much perturbed, she fell down on the ground, and Lord Krishna immediately became compassionate and agreed not to kill the foolish Rukmiṇī. But at the same time, he wanted to give him some light punishment, so he tied him with a piece of cloth and snipped at his mustache, beard, and hair, keeping some spots here and there. While Krishna was dealing with Rukmiṇī in this way, the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty, commanded by Balarama himself, broke the whole strength of Rukmi's army, just as an elephant in a pond discards the feeble stem of a lotus flower. In other words, as an elephant breaks the whole construction of a lotus flower while bathing in the reservoir of water, the military strength of the Yadus broke up Rukmi's forces. When the commanders of the Yadu dynasty come back to see Krishna, they were all surprised to see the condition of Rukmiṇī. Lord Balarama became especially compassionate toward his sister-in-law, who was newly married to his brother. To please Rukmiṇī, Balarama personally untied Rukmiṇī, and to further please her, Balarama, as the elder brother of Krishna, spoke some words of chastisement. Krishna, your action is not at all satisfactory. He said, this is an abomination, very much contrary to our family tradition. To cut someone's hair and shave his mustache and beard is almost comparable to killing him. Whatever Rukmiṇī might have been, he is now our brother-in-law, a relative of our family, and you should not have put him in such a condition. After this, to pacify Rukmiṇī, Lord Balarama said to her, you should not be sorry that your brother has been made odd-looking. Everyone suffers or enjoys the results of his own actions. Lord Balarama wanted to impress upon Rukmiṇī that she should not be sorry for the consequences her brother suffered due to his actions. There was no need of being too affectionate toward such a brother. Lord Balarama again turned toward Krishna and said, my dear Krishna, a relative, even though he commits such a blunder and deserves to be killed, should be excused. For when such a relative is conscious of his own fault, that consciousness itself is like death. Therefore, there is no need to kill him. Balarama again turned toward Rukmiṇī and informed her that the current duty of the Kshatriya in human society is so fixed that according to the principles of fighting, one's own brother may become an enemy. Then a Kshatriya does not hesitate to kill his own brother. In other words, Lord Balarama wanted to instruct Rukmiṇī that Rukmiṇī and Krishna were right in not showing mercy to each other in the fighting, despite the family consideration that they happened to be brothers-in-law. Sri Balarama informed Rukmiṇī that Kshatriyas are typical emblems of the materialistic way of life. They become puffed up whenever there is a question of material acquisition. Therefore, when there is a fight between two belligerent Kshatriyas for kingdom, land, wealth, women, prestige, or power, they try to put one another into the most abominable condition. Balarama instructed Rukmiṇī that her affection toward her brother Rukmiṇī, who had created enmity with so many persons, was a perverse consideration befitting an ordinary materialist. Her brother's character was not at all admirable, considering his treatment of his friends, and yet Rukmiṇī, like an ordinary woman, was affectionate toward him. He was not fit to be her brother, and still Rukmiṇī was lenient toward him. Besides that, Balarama continued, the consideration that a person is neutral or is one's friend or enemy is generally made by persons in the bodily concept of life. Such foolish persons are bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. The spirit soul is of the same pure quality in any embodiment of matter, but those who are not sufficiently intelligent see only the bodily differences between those who are not see only bodily differences between animals and men, literates and illiterates, rich and poor, which cover the pure spirit soul. Such differences, observed merely on the basis of the body, are exactly like the differences between fires in terms of the various types of fuel they consume. Whatever the size and shape of the fuel, there is no such variety of size and shape in the fire which comes out. Similarly, in the sky, there are no differences in size or shape. In this way, Balarama reconciled the situation by his moral and ethical instructions to Rukmiṇī and Krishna. To Rukmiṇī, he stated further This body is part of the material manifestation, consisting of the material elements, living conditions, and interactions of the modes of material nature. The living entity or spirit soul, being in contact with these, is transmigrating from one body to another due to illusory enjoyment, and that transmigration is known as material existence. This contact of the living entity with the material manifestation has neither integration nor disintegration. My dear chaste sister-in-law, the spirit soul is, of course, the cause of this material body, just as the sun is the cause of sunlight, eyesight, and the forms of material manifestation. The example of the sunshine and the material manifestation is very appropriate in understanding the living entity's contact with the material world. In the morning, the sun rises, and the heat and light gradually expand throughout the whole day. The sun is the cause of all material shapes and forms, for it is due to the sun that integration and disintegration of material elements take place. But as soon as the sun sets, the whole manifestation is no longer connected to the sun, which has passed from one place to another. When the sun passes from the eastern to the western hemisphere, the results of the interactions due to the sunshine in the eastern hemisphere remain, but the sunshine itself is visible in the western hemisphere. Similarly, the living entity accepts or produces different bodies and different bodily relationships in a particular circumstance, but as soon as he gives up the present body and accepts another, he has nothing to do with the former body. Similarly, the living entity has nothing to do with the next body he accepts. He is always free from the contact of this bodily contamination. Therefore, continued Balarama, the appearance and disappearance of the body have nothing to do with the living entity, just as the waxing and waning of the moon have nothing to do with the moon. When the moon waxes, we falsely think that the moon is developing, and when it wanes, we think the moon is decreasing. Factually, the moon as it is always the same. It has nothing to do with such visible activities of waxing and waning. Lord Balarama continued, one's consciousness in material existence can be compared to sleeping and dreaming. When a man sleeps, he dreams of many non-factual happenings, and as a result of dreaming, he becomes subject to different kinds of distress and happiness. Similarly, when a person is in the dream of material consciousness, he suffers the effects of accepting a body and giving it up again in material existence. Opposite to this material consciousness is Krishna consciousness. In other words, when a man is elevated to the platform of Krishna consciousness, he becomes free from this false conception of life. In this way, Sri Balarama instructed Rukmiṇī in spiritual knowledge. He further addressed his sister-in-law thus, "Sweet, smiling Rukmiṇī, do not be aggrieved by false notions caused by ignorance. Only because of false notions does one become unhappy, but one can immediately remove this unhappiness by discussing the philosophy of actual life. Be happy on that platform only." After hearing such enlightening instruction from Sri Balarama, Rukmiṇī immediately became pacified and happy and adjusted her mind, which was very much afflicted by the degraded position of her brother Rukmiṇī, which was very much, as far as Rukmiṇī was concerned, his promise was not fulfilled, nor was his mission successful. He had come from home, on the contrary, he had come from home with his soldiers and military phalanx to defeat Krishna and release his sister, but on the contrary, he lost all his soldiers and military strength. He was personally degraded and very sorry, but by the grace of the Lord, he can continue his life to its fixed destination. Because he was a Kshatriya, he could remember his promise that he would not return to his capital city Kundina without killing Krishna and releasing his sister, which he had failed to do. Therefore, he decided in anger not to return to his capital city, and he constructed a small cottage in the village known as Bhojakata, where he resided for the rest of his life. After defeating all the opposing elements and forcibly carrying away Rukmiṇī, Krishna brought her to his capital city, Dvārakā, and then married her according to the Vedic ritualistic principles. After this marriage, Krishna became the king of the Yadus at Dvārakā. On the occasion of his marriage with Rukmiṇī, all the inhabitants were happy, and in every house there were great ceremonies. The inhabitants of Dvārakā city were so much pleased that they dressed themselves with the nicest possible ornaments and garments and went to present gifts according to their means to the newly married couple, Krishna and Rukmiṇī. All the houses of the Yadupuri, Dvārakā, were decorated with flags, festoons, and flowers. Each and every house had an extra gate specifically prepared for this occasion, and on both sides of the gate were big water jugs filled with water. The whole city was made fragrant by the burning of fine incense, and at night there was illumination from thousands of lamps which decorated every building. The entire city appeared jubilant on the occasion of Lord Krishna's marriage with Rukmiṇī. Everywhere in the city there were profuse decorations of banana trees and betel nut trees. These two trees are considered very auspicious in happy ceremonies. At the same time, there was an assembly of many elephants who carried the respective kings of different friendly kingdoms. It is the habit of the elephant that whenever he sees some small plants and trees, out of his sportive and frivolous nature, he uproots the trees and throws them hither and thither. The elephants assembled on this occasion also scattered the banana and betel nut trees, but in spite of such intoxicated action, the whole city, with the trees thrown here and there, looked very nice. The friendly kings of the Kurus and the Pandavas were represented by Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, the 5 Pandava brothers, King Drupada, King Santardana, and Rukmiṇī's father, Bhishmaka. Because of Krishna's kidnapping Rukmiṇī, there was initially some misunderstanding between the two families, but Bhishmaka, king of Vidarbha, being approached by Sri Balarama and persuaded by many saintly persons, was induced to participate in the marriage ceremony of Krishna and Rukmiṇī. Although the incident of the kidnapping was not a very happy occurrence in the kingdom of Vidarbha, kidnapping was not an unusual affair among Kshatriyas. Kidnapping was in fact current in almost all their marriages. Anyway, King Bhishmaka was from the very beginning inclined to hand over his beautiful daughter to Krishna. In one way or another, his purpose had been served, and so he was pleased to join the marriage ceremony, even though his eldest son was degraded in the fight. It is mentioned in the Padma Purana that Maharaj Nanda and the cowherd boys of Vrindavan joined the marriage ceremony. Kings from the kingdoms of Kuru, Srinjaya, Kekaya, Vidarbha, and Kunti all came to Dvārakā on this occasion and met with one another very joyfully. The story of Rukmiṇī's being kidnapped by Krishna was poeticized, and professional readers recited it everywhere. All the assembled kings and their daughters especially were struck with wonder and very much pleased upon hearing the chivalrous activities of Krishna. In this way, all the visitors, as well as the inhabitants of Dvārakā city, were joyful to see Krishna and Rukmiṇī together. In other words, the goddess of fortune was now united with the Supreme Lord, the maintainer of everyone, and thus all the people felt extremely jubilant. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 54th chapter of Krishna. Krishna defeats all the princes and takes Rukmiṇī home to Dvārakā. Jai, all glories to Sri Krishna and Balarama. All glories to Rukmiṇī ji. All glories to all the chivalrous kings. All glories to the Yadu soldiers who held off the opposing princes in their attempt to try to stop Krishna from kidnapping Rukmiṇī. All glories to the citizens of Dvārakā and all the friendly kings who came to participate in the wedding, including the father of Rukmiṇī, Hare Krishna, who had his desire fulfilled. Well, what a story, huh? We're around 7:55, so I think it's too late to start another chapter. So we'll end our reading tonight and wait with bated breath for the reflections of all the assembled sages in cyberspace. Well, they're actually in different places, but Hare Krishna.
First is from Gopakanya Devi Dasi. She says, Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj and all friends. All glories to Srila Prabhupāda in your daily reading service of Sri Krishna Katha. Jai Ho.
Haribo.
From Sudevi Dasi.
Haribo, Sudevi Dasi.
She says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Last night I was reviewing in my mind what you read about Krishna kidnapping Rukmiṇī. I could not go to sleep unless I got up and read the next chapter. I wanted to fall asleep thinking, meditating on it. That is the best escape from my life of obstacles. Haribo.
Haribo. Yes. Reading these books, hearing these books especially, transports us to the spiritual atmosphere, because these pastimes are eternal and the personalities are eternal that are close to Krishna, his associates. And so there's a different result from hearing about them than hearing of any other thing, of any other subject matter. So thank you very much for reminding us of that, and let us keep our minds as much as possible remembering these transcendental episodes of Krishna's pastimes. Hare Krishna.
Daitari Haridas says, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Daitari Haridas, Haribo.
This is from Celine Wetzels.
Celine Wetzels. I don't know who she is. I don't recall the name. Anyway, Hare Krishna.
She says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for your daily readings. It is very inspiring to listen to you. All glories to Srila Prabhupāda. Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol. Thank you so much.
From Brian Phillips.
Hare Krishna Bhakta Brian. Hari Bol.
He says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupāda. Your recitation of the Krishna book is so beautiful and is so uplifting. I am forever in debt for the service you render to us all through your pledge to read Srila Prabhupada's books daily.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Bhakta Brian. Thank you. I pray for the day that we'll be able to see each other face and face. I'm not so far away now. I mean, Hythe, which is not so far. I hope you can come and visit someday.
He says, it is so good to see you in such good health and hear you in such fine voice.
Oh, thank you very much, Hare Krishna.
My eternal thanks to Krishna for that.
Thank you very much for your well-wishing, Hare Krishna. I feel blessed.
From Bhaktivedanta, he says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my obeisances. Thanks for reading tonight.
Hare Krishna Bhaktivedanta. Thanks for hearing tonight.
I couldn't quite grasp the analogy of the sunshine in the material manifestation. Would you be able to shine some light on it?
You couldn't quite grasp the analogy of the sunshine? Well, it's an allegorical statement, or a figurative statement, or a poetic statement that describes how the sun is manifesting everything. In addition to the fact that the sun's energies are causing the greenness to come from trees, photosynthesis, and people to see and get energy to do what they're doing, it also manifests the forms. And when it's there, the forms are there. When it goes away, the forms go away. They seem to go away. So that's what he's talking about, how the sunshine is, it seems to be going away, and things seem to be disappearing and appearing, but actually they're always there. But they're manifest by the movements of the sun. Therefore we're dependent on the sun in so many ways. Hare Krishna.
This is from Bhakta Seb.
Bhakta Seb, Hare Krishna. Where the heck are you? We're missing you over here.
He says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my obeisances to you. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda.
All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda.
I love how those frivolous elephants threw around little trees, but the party was nice anyway.
And it looked beautiful somehow or other. Yeah.
So much detail Śrīla Prabhupāda is giving.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
From Anandamurti Devi Dasi. She says, Dear Guru Maharaj and assembled devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupāda. Hearing the whole story of Krishna and Rukmiṇī and the citizens of Dvārakā, I am very much satisfied with the whole Lord's arrangements. He is the specialist of all the arrangement of the devotees.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. I'll say one thing that really delighted me was how Balarama, we heard Balarama. You don't very seldom hear Balarama actually speaking philosophy. But he spoke so nicely to Rukmiṇī and to Krishna. And as the elder brother of Krishna, he has that, that privilege of doing that. And how he just chilled the whole situation. It was so stunningly wonderful to me. Hare Krishna. Because when we actually hear the philosophy and hear the knowledge, as Krishna says in the Gita, if you approach a knowledgeable person, a spiritual master, with submissive inquiry and service, then he can give you the knowledge because he has seen the truth. Then the next verse is described what that knowledge is. And the knowledge, when you get that knowledge, you never fall into illusion again, because you see that all living entities are but a part of the Supreme, Krishna says, or in other words, that they're mine. So we see everything and everyone in relationship to Krishna, and therefore everything is pacified. The mind becomes pacified, it becomes peaceful, just as Lord Balaram was saying. If you absorb yourself in the real philosophy of life, you become pacified, because you see everything in relationship to Krishna, and you see that all of the apparent contradictions and enemies and friends and fighting and love making and all these things that go on, they're just the modes of nature. They're just the modes of nature. Of course, these are Krishna's pastimes, so it's more than the modes of nature. But that's the philosophy that pacifies the mind. So I was very touched by Lord Balaram's preaching tonight. Hare Krishna.
Daitari Haridas. He says, interesting point that Prabhupada says, quote, it is mentioned in the Padma Purana that Maharaj Nanda and the cowherd boys of Vrindavan joined the marriage ceremony.
Yes, that was a very interesting point.
It seems like the Padma Purana has many intimate details in its regarding Krishna's pastimes.
Yes, there are a very few Puranas that have these kinds of details. It's not possible to put all the details of Krishna's pastimes in any one book. And when you try to put them all together like that, sometimes it's not the same as the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam does it all very nicely. And Prabhupada's, masterful summarization, where he does include these kinds of things and the commentaries of other acharyas, but he does it in a way that it's seamless and it flows like a tapestry. And if you try to do it without that kind of knowledge and resourcefulness, spiritual resourcefulness, then it can cause rasabasa sometimes and make the stories awkward. Hare Krishna.
He also says, I understand that the Bhagavatam is the Bhagavatam Purana, the main Purana.
Yes.
However, is the Padma Purana a book Prabhupada wanted translated or his disciples to translate one day?
He talked about translating himself but he didn't finish. So, and yes, it is his will that the BBT eventually translate, as many books as possible. Whether or not that turns out, he also said should be done very, very carefully. He said not anybody can do it. Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu was capable of doing it. And there are others. Bhanu Swami is capable of doing it. When I asked Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu directly if he knew anybody that could translate without going off, he mentioned Bhanu Swami as one of two. Another one is no longer with us, so I won't mention the name. But yes. So what was the? Repeat his thing again, because there was something in there I wanted to respond to. I forgot what it was.
He says, I understand that the Bhagavatam is the Bhagavat Purana,
yes,
the main Purana. However, is the Padma Purana a book Prabhupada wanted translated?
Yes, he did, but at the same time, he didn't do it. He was trying to finish the Bhagavatam. But what we should consider is that according to Jiva Goswami, the Bhagavatam is the source of all knowledge. It purifies anything that may be in other Puranas that are not completely pure, or not completely just about Krishna. The Bhagavatam is, how do we know that? We know that because even after Vyāsadeva had edited all the Vedas and compiled all the Puranas, or edited the Puranas, and then he wrote himself the Vedanta Sutra and the Mahabharata, which is kind of a composite of all the Puranas, he wasn't satisfied. He wasn't completely satisfied. So why should we be satisfied with anything less than the Bhagavatam? In this way we can understand how we should feel about the Bhagavatam. Even though there may be more details in other places and people may be interested, but the Bhagavatam is the book that when Vyāsadeva compiled, he became completely satisfied. That should be a lesson to us. Hare Krishna.
Bhakti Rupa says, wow, thanks for the explanation, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the question. Explanations can't come without questions. And that's why all the scriptures and all the Puranas, they're all organized in the format of questions and answers.
From Rama Kishore Das.
Haribol Rama Kishore.
He says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, glories to Prabhupada.
Study the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam daily. Nothing else is required.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you.
Daityari Haridas says, thanks Maharaj, that was very helpful.
Thank you for the question. Hare Krishna.
And Rati Manjari says, Jai Guru Maharaj.
Jai Raya Rati, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for all those lovely reflections and also deep questions. And I don't have very much knowledge, but whatever I have heard, I try to repeat it without changing it. Hare Krishna. Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. So tomorrow night we will hear the proceeding adventures of Sri Krishna, the spiritual storybook of reality. Hare Krishna. See you tomorrow night. Hari Bol.